Hello, everyone. I'm Vivek Atray, and I'm joined by Mr. David Gower, all the way from England. And we also have a friend, Dr. H.K. Bali. We're going to be speaking about the test series, which is coming up, 5 test matches, India versus England. And this is January 2024, in case some of you are watching it years later, just to put the context. And Mr. Gower, David, thank you for being here with us.
No, as ever, my pleasure. It's things like this, series like this, count for an awful lot. And no doubt one of our little discussion points at some stage, if not now, if later, whenever, is, of course, how important Test cricket remains to so many people, especially people like me.
No, we were actually going to bring that up later, but since you brought it up, David, do you think Test cricket is really what is keeping cricket sane, and the kind of balance which is needed? Because we are really in a pajama slam bang era, to criticize the white ball game a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think it's very obvious to so many people that there is huge competition for time. And it's time and money. It's all the usual things that are potential issues. So when you have phenomenally successful events like IPL, getting bigger and stronger each and every year, when you have South Africa, for instance, relying almost entirely on its own SAT20 league to finance the game in South Africa, when you have the Caribbean, where the most successful cricket appears to be the Caribbean League, the Caribbean Premier League. These are things that compete for basically attention and time. And when you've got people like me who, basically for me, everything centered on Test cricket. We played ODIs, we didn't have T20. The shortest form of the game when I was playing was, 40 overs. And that seemed like a sort of a hit and giggle. That seemed like a short game at the time. Now, I would have to say that, I still maintain, and I'd be fascinated to listen to, the great players of this modern era. But I know, for instance, another man who obviously has to get a mention, Virat Kohli. I know Virat rates his status in world cricket first and foremost by his ability to play Test cricket amongst the best and to be the best. And I think that's important to players. And it's one of those things that has to be transmitted, I think, to those that watch the game. But of course, the public at large, be they in India, UK, Australia, around the world, they'll decide what they want to watch. Absolutely. They will drive what they want to watch. And those that are responsible for running the game have to respect that. But I think also it's very important to keep the message alive that, Test cricket is something very, very special. So there are lots of things that we need to discuss along those lines in due course. I say the boards, the powerful people at large at the moment, whether that includes ICC is a moot point, but the powerful people, the powerful boards are the people who will, in the end, dictate how much Test cricket we're allowed to see.
Absolutely, David. And just to put it in context, India was in South Africa recently for 2 test matches, and the shortest test match ever was played, the second one. And India won the second test, lost the first one, so it was a 1-all series. India's never won a series in South Africa. But test matches, that was because of the pitch, and it was pretty much dynamite and rated as below average later by ICC. But test matches are getting shorter anyway. So players are not able to play those long innings, and the white ball game is having an impact. In some cases, you might say it's great because we don't have any draws anymore. So are you missing the draws? Are you missing those changes the changes that have taken place? Have you accepted them in your mind?
I suppose there has been a balance, and draws are becoming less frequent. I think we need to see what there are impressions. It's very easy to get impressions like that. I think I haven't got in front of me the absolute statistics that prove the theory or not. But what we have seen, and actually this is obviously very relevant to this discussion ahead of this series, what we have seen is England primarily, anyway, England especially, playing a brand of Test cricket which counts as positive. It's new. It's sort of new, improved Test cricket with added entertainment. I feel like I'm sounding like an advert here. It comes with risks. It comes with risks. But it is the sort of thing that will keep Test cricket alive. But having said that, I mean, I'm going to have to use the word, here we are in the first 5 minutes, I'm going to have to use the word Bazball, even though Baz himself doesn't like it. But the style of cricket that England play is something they've been able to do for the last couple of years with ups and downs. I have to say they should have won the Ashes in the past summer and the summer gone by, but some of the risks they were taking cost them dear at a couple of key moments. So 2-2 it was. Ashes drawn, Ashes remain with Australia. This coming series is one of the biggest tests of all, playing cricket in India against an Indian side that is very strong and very confident in home conditions, especially. So that'll be the biggest test of Bazball. But it has brought people back to Test cricket. It has, it's a sort of concept which I think is vital to those that want to see Test cricket thrive. And also, but I mean, the corollary is this: that not every side has players that can play that way. England are lucky that they have 6 or 7 batsmen who are comfortable playing that way and who have been given a chance to play that way for a couple of years. They've been given chances because even low scores don't get you kicked out anymore. And then eventually you see fruition. And the best example of that is Zach Crawley, who had a magnificent summer against Australia. And yet in days gone by, in bygone eras, would have lost his place 2 years earlier.
Right. I think, David, we'll come to the series now, and then I'll toss it to Dr. Bali. One question I have is, leading up to this series, England would have learned from the mistakes of a couple of years ago when they did well in Sri Lanka. And then they won one test match in India. But then it was all downhill, and the ball kept as low as their performance, you could say. Akshar Patel was bowling, he was bowling unplayable deliveries, and he took about bag full of wickets. Only Ashwin took more than Akshar last time. Jadeja was probably injured, if I remember. Joe Root started off well. Johnny Bairstow didn't find his bearings. Ben Stokes was probably not there. Now we have these 3 senior players and a wizened English team, which is, of course, still playing the Bazball, or if I may say, the electrifying format of Test cricket, which works sometimes and doesn't work sometimes. In India, you have to get your head down, David. Basically, will they be able to do it?
Well, actually, interesting question. Really good question. Because let's remake some assumptions here. If the ball is going to be turning a lot over these 5 Test matches, then yes, back in my long gone era, you did your best to defend and get used to it. And if you stayed long enough, be it at home in England or in India on pitches, actually in those days were not big turners, a lot of very flat pitches. But if you just hung around on those good pitches and got into a rhythm, you could make runs. Hence, for instance, 84-5, the likes of Mike Gatting and Graham Fowler, double hundreds in Chennai. Now, things have changed. I mean, the way we've seen pitches produced in India in the last 2 or 3 series, for instance, and against Australia is probably the best example. Playing that way, and especially also, let's face it, the way you have to play has been changed by DRS and reviews and the way umpires look at LBWs. So techniques have changed as well since my day. So the bat comes into play far more often than it used to when you were defending and propping and getting the feel for it. But the thing is this: I think during that Australia series, correct me if I'm wrong, when Australia just tried to play properly, there were all sorts of problems. When someone tries to take the attack back, be it Ashwin, be it Jadeja, be it Akshar, whoever it might be, when someone tries to take the attack back, that comes with risk. Of course it does. But at the same time, if the ball is, if we're talking about big turning pitches, then as a batsman, everyone knows there is a ball with your name on it. Right. And it's a question of when you get it. So if you've hung around for an hour and scored 3 and you get that ball, the game has not advanced. If you've played a few shots during that hour and you've got, say, 30 or 40, then it's a much better return for you might not be getting hundreds, you might not be getting double hundreds, but in the context of games that are played on big turning pitches, those 30s and 40s actually can make a difference. So England, I am very sure, will have had 10 days in Abu Dhabi as their preparation for this. Yes, to talk about all these things, I've not been there. I've not seen what they've been doing. They've probably played a lot of golf as well. That seems to be the way they prepare themselves best nowadays. But they will have practiced against a turning ball. They'll have practiced the sort of shots that give them a chance to make runs, because in these sorts of games, if you haven't got some runs on the board, then you're never in the game. So somehow you've got to get runs. Now, I can point you back to Graham Gooch, that infamous semi-final in Mumbai all those years ago now, sweeping time and time again against, must have been Ravi, I'm guessing, but time and time again, sweeping to the boundary and somehow making a brilliant
Money was there, David. Maninder Singh.
Oh, yes. Okay, right. Yes. So look, there are, someone has to be that man who is able to play the positive role. And the other thing that England do well is they don't worry about individuals having a bad day. They understand that it's a collective effort. So that if you have a strong top six, all buying into the same principles, then if one gets out for 10 or 0, and at least someone gets some runs, or 2 or 3 or 4 get some runs, then they're in a game. Then they reckon they're in the game. So I think it is going to be the ultimate test of this way they play, which is why I think it's fascinating to so many people.
Absolutely. Dr. Bali, the spinners are being discussed. Would you like to spin a question to David? So while Dr. Bali is just connecting again, David, what do you think is the difference between the Indian spinners and the English spinners? Oh, Dr. Bali, you're there. Go ahead.
Yeah, David, first thing first, we have been talking about Indian spinners and spinning pitches for the last 3-4 years very aggressively, and they have been blamed. The board has been blamed. The groundsmen have been blamed, but it is all over the world. If we look at English pitches also, we are talking about your name being on the ball. Same thing happens on English pitches also in the early stages of the match, right outside the off stump. One of them is going to get nicked, especially if it is Anderson bowling or something else bowling. So I think it is, if we take the tennis analogy, then you have to do well all over the world in all sorts of pitches, in all sorts of climate, to be a good test cricketer. That is the challenge of being a test cricketer. So I think playing spin is also an art. And that art is probably getting lost somewhere, because we play with very firm hands and we try to hit on the up and we don't wait for. So has batting changed over the years? And that's why playing on spinning pitches, our turning ball is becoming that much more tougher for the one-day brand of cricketers which we have now.
Short answer is yes, things have changed. Of course they've changed. And that DRS implementation has made a big difference because of the, as it were, the proof that decisions that were given not out 40 years ago on sort of the element of doubt are now confirmed to be out. And umpires themselves have realized that they were being, shall we say, a little overcautious in days gone by. Not everyone, of course, but by and large, that's been the trend. So batsmen are obliged to play with the bat more often. Just putting the pad out there as a second line of defence and hoping is no longer an option. You can't do that because, again, that gives an option to a bowler in terms of getting you out. So things have changed. And you're right. There have been huge influences from white ball cricket on the way that international players approach the longer form game as well. And you're right. So old techniques have been rather forgotten, but would they work in this modern game? And I think, the clever batsmen, let's face it, the clever batsmen, the best batsmen, and there's sort of a short list that we all know about with Virat at the top, Joe Root in there, people like Kane Williamson. These are all superb players of the modern era, capable of playing red ball cricket, pink ball cricket, white ball cricket, capable of making big runs in test matches, and capable of playing spin. So, it's always been the way. If you go back to, let's think about it. If you go back to, for instance, and this will be ancient history, in fact, almost a prehistoric history. If you go back to the likes of the great man, Richie Benno, who was such a good commentator, of course, to so many of us and an icon in the commentary box to so many of us, his era of leg spin was important to Australia. But Jim Laker getting 10 wickets in the innings at Old Trafford, part of that was because the Aussies in that, I forget the year now, but it's the 60s. Part of that was because the Australian batsmen at that time didn't have a technique to cope with the turning ball at Old Trafford. And so ever since, generations of Asian players, English players, Australian players. When I first went to Australia, club cricket first, then a couple of test tours, the one thing that was new to me was the amount of wrist spin, because we didn't really have it in the 70s in the UK. Very, very few leg spinners or left arm wrist spinners. But in Australia, every stateside we played in 1978, 79, 79, 80, every stateside you played had at least one wrist spinner, right arm or left arm. So that was a learning curve for people like me. Great exposure, and great. And once you've seen it, you know what it's about. So it's the same thing nowadays. People have to learn, and the best will still get runs, and those who aren't up to it won't.
You think this series is all spin versus batsman, and we have taken fast bowler out of the equation? We have some great fast bowlers on both sides. You think they are only going to bowl for 5 hours? Is English team only prepared for spin?
Doctor, you'll remember the days when you had Chandrasekhar, Bedi, Venkat, Prasanna. And I made my debut my first test match against India. Luckily, it was at Edgbaston on a very nice batting pitch, but against Bedi, Prasanna, not Bedi, Venkat and Chandra. So a nice, easy way to have a look at some of the great spin bowlers of the era. And some of them were called, they were approaching, shall we say, the latter days of their careers. So maybe their best had gone before them. But at the same time, 3 of the greats of all time. And in that era, someone like Sonny, the great man himself, Sunil Gavaskar, would have a couple of overs with the new ball. He might just sort of let it drop into the turf and sort of get a bit of dust on it, and you'd hand the ball to Bishan, 10 minutes later. So this, that sort of thing's no longer it's nothing new as such. But of course, what you do have nowadays in India is a very strong hand of excellent pace bowlers.
Absolutely.
So, whatever the conditions, this to me, I guess, is the difference between the two sides. Because we'd like to think that the England team has some good pace bowlers. Jimmy Anderson's still going, decades into his career, it seems. Like Robinson, who's a fine bowler nowadays, Mark Wood with the extra pace. There are some very good bowlers in that England squad with pace. Likewise, you know all the names for the Indian squad. When they're fit and firing and fully available, there is some very, very good pace bowling available. So the good news for India is that they have strength in batting, strength with the seam bowlers, and they have the stronger hand when you look at the spin bowlers of both squads. So England will say, yes, we've got some good batting, we've got some very good seam bowling, but they know damn well that their spin bowling is rather more limited.
Right. HK, you have another question?
No, I just wanted to know that about spin attack of England. We have Leach, and who has a lot of success against Australia, but others are not very, very experienced people. We may have Joe Root doing well. We have a new leg spinner who had some visa problem now, Bashir probably, and we have Rehan coming up. So you think these rookies, if I can call them, would be taking a good part in the Test cricket and playing a role in getting Indian batsmen out twice?
Well, England would obviously hope so. Jack Leach, Jack is one of these sort of folk heroes. The best thing I can say about Jack is he's been treated very well by Ben Stokes. So there have been times where his confidence has been very low, but Ben Stokes has restored his confidence. He's a very steady bowler. He does it, but not much more than that, to be honest. I don't like to be critical as such, but he's there are times I've watched Jack bowl. I think we'll just do something different. He's very much a repetitive, line and length, steady bowler. Rehan Ahmed as the leg spinner is a precocious talent. Played the one Test match at the end of the series against Pakistan last year, and a year and a bit ago now, and picked up 5 wickets in his first Test match on a pitch actually that turned. So he won't mind if he gets a game and the ball is turning. He's learning consistency. So not every ball is in the right place, but at least he does have variety, and he lots of energy, huge energy. So I might even pick, if there's a conflict there, I might even sort of dare to pick Rehan Ahmed before Jack Leach, on the grounds that he will potentially cause more problems, ball turning or not turning. Yeah, that it could be a gamble there. But in the likes of the other ones you mentioned, I mean, Shoaib, the man with the visa problem, Shoaib is an off spinner who's played half a dozen games for Somerset. He's tall, he's clever, he's intelligent. You know, they've seen what they think is huge potential. Tom Hartley, the left-arm spinner from Lancashire, again has height, and he's a sort of Axar Patel, but we don't know yet. You know, it's that sort of thing where until you really have a look at these people and put them under pressure, obviously, you know, playing in India is huge pressure. Whether or not we'll see them in the series as it unfolds remains to be seen. How the pitches themselves unfold and how the matches unfold and fitness and form and all the rest of it. But initially, you'll have, I suspect you'll probably have Leach in the side. You might have Rayan Ahmed in the side. You'll have Joe Root, of course. If you give him a pitch like the Ahmedabad pitch last time round, well, 5 for 2. When Joe Root gets 5 for 2,
yeah,
it's not an ordinary day. Let's put it that way, and it's not an ordinary pitch.
Absolutely. David, I want to put the focus on the captains, Rohit Sharma and Ben Stokes, and also on the two senior players once more, Virat Kohli and Joe Root. So, comparing the captains, Rohit Sharma and Ben Stokes first, how do you think they differ in style as captains? And do you think Ben Stokes is going to really concentrate on his batting a lot more because he's not bowling?
Well, I mean, the Ben Stokes knee is one of the great mysteries of our modern times.
The Ben Stokes knee.
Okay. You know, it's almost got a life of its own, or a lack of life of its own. You know, the rest of Ben has an extraordinary life. His knee is doing different things. You know, his knee is in a different postcode,
Right.
and it seems to be a closely guarded secret. I mean, I've sort of tried to have a look at, you know, whatever information has come out of Abu Dhabi. What information? I mean, we need to keep an eye on it. But how much? I mean, he's had an operation relatively recently. Now, the way he bowls, he puts an awful lot of effort into delivering a ball 20 yards, and that sort of effort, you know, will put an awful lot of strain on a new knee. So I don't have the details. I don't have his X-rays. I haven't seen the notes, the doctor's notes, the surgeon's notes on what was done over the winter. But you can't see him bowling 20 overs. So if he does turn his arm over at all, it'll be relatively gently. So you're talking about, should we say, an attack which will be 4.5 men, unless they make a bold attempt to bowl India out and risk the batting. So, I mean, it's going to be 4.5 bowlers. And Ben will do what he can. As a captain, I mean, this is where Ben is outstanding, because he's been such a revelation to all of us in England over the last couple of years since he got the job, because you look at him originally and you didn't suspect that he had all the depths and all the talents that would make him such a good captain. He has instinct, a really good instinct for the game. He has a real positivity. He has empathy for his players. He's been through things on and off the field that would have tested certainly would have tested weaker men, would have tested stronger men. And I think that ability to know that there are problems for all potentially gives him empathy. So his understanding of what each and every player is going through in that squad of his. So between him and Brendan McCullum, they have built a culture where people don't fear. You know, they don't fear for their place because they get a single figure score. They don't fear for their place if they bowl 30 overs, none for 100. You know, the guarantees are there. The implicit trust is there. And alongside that, I mean, I'll go back again to that tour of Pakistan, which was 2 Decembers ago now, so a year and a bit ago, on pitches that were largely flat, apart from the final one in Karachi. But they forced the game. And on pitches which any other England side in history would have drawn matches on, they managed to force results, albeit, I mean, the 5 days in Islamabad, in Rawalpindi, the 5 days in Lahore, in Multan rather, they didn't play in Lahore, in Multan. Those games went to the last 15, 20 minutes, but they'd done enough to promote the game, to push the game forward in the previous 4.5 days to give themselves a chance of winning those games. And they did. So that whole attitude is a game changer. And that's why, I mean, personally, I would rate Ben ahead of Rohit. Rohit has a very, very good team. And Rohit has a very good brain, and he's a shrewd little man. He's so little is not in any way critical. He is a very shrewd leader. He's a strong-minded leader. Obviously, every team, any team, it's just that little bit easier to lead a team that has talent. And if you've got the sort of talent that's available to Rohit at the moment, well, you've got lots to work with.
We don't have much time for this one. We're getting Ravi in quickly. But David, I want a quick reaction on Ian Botham, your great friend Lord Ian Botham, and Ben Stokes being all-rounders, fast bowling all-rounders. I mean, Ben Stokes is more of a batsman these days, but comparisons in captaincy. Why did Ian Botham not perhaps perform that much as a captain? And you were captain around that time as well, as compared to Ben.
It's a brilliant question. I mean, the simple answer is this: Ben, I go back to the word I used just now about Ben, has greater empathy. Ian, because of his extraordinary instinct for batting, bowling, and fielding, and not to mention extraordinary instinct and love of life off the field as soon as the game on that particular day had finished, couldn't quite understand why other people didn't think the same way as him. And he didn't, this is just an observation as opposed to criticism. He didn't have that same empathy, so that, come the close of play in, say, I don't know, Port of Spain or somewhere, there'll be players bruised and battered on our team who needed a bit of a sort of quiet word or just a sort of bit of empathy, a bit of sympathy, a bit of something.
Yeah.
And Ian, of course, would be going, right, well, we've done the day. Thank you very much indeed. Look at his clock, thinking we're back in the hotel in 30 minutes, back at the Hilton on the hill there, the upside down Hilton. Probably have a drink at 7, have another one at 10 past, maybe another one at 20. He was, it wasn't quite, it was a different style of leadership. I mean, he did, to be fair to him, have a series against the West Indies in England, early 80s, where it was decided on one match alone. Much better than my record against the West Indies, I can tell you that. And we nearly won that game. So, I mean, I think the difference is in that word empathy.
I think so.
Ian just expected people to know what to do, and just got a bit surprised when they didn't.
I think you're absolutely spot on, David. I just knew that you were going to say that, but wanted our viewers to understand, and was a brilliant answer. Before we go to Ravi, let me say that Sachin Tendulkar had similar problems as a captain, expecting too much from the team, just like Ian Botham did. But with empathy, but somehow he just, couldn't bring the best out of the team as maybe Saurav Ganguly or MS Dhoni or Virat Kohli or even Rohit Sharma could. Anyway, we'll leave that one without any response. Ravi, over to you to ask David any question that you'd like. Ravi is a friend from Bangalore, and he's a cricket. He loves cricket more than any of us, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, Mr. Gower. I'm not sure where you're taking this call from. It's a real pleasure hearing you out. I'm really, I know that you've always been insightful and analytical about the game. The fact that you mentioned you have a prehistoric understanding of the game, historic understanding of the game, and you're also very contemporary. The way you keep the tabs on the contemporary players, it's very amazing. It goes to prove that you're a keen follower of the game even today. My friends and fellow aficionados asked you questions around the nuances surrounding upcoming series, but I will keep it generic. Given your broader understanding of the game and having watched the game for many years, having played an integral part of the game, how do you see the game? You would reckon the game has evolved significantly. What aspects of the evolution that interested you, or what aspects that you are a little apprehensive, the way the game is progressing? That's one. And the lighter question is, do you really need 5 days for a test match, given the way results are being produced in 2 days, 3 days? Should we actually revisit that call and say maybe 3 days is good enough for a test match?
Well, okay, yeah, some very broad-ranging topics, of course. I mean, because we are lucky, from my point of view, in the UK to have good support for Test cricket. There's a lot of people in this country value it very, very highly. And they like, I mean, we quite like the idea of keeping it as 5 days. Now, one of the great pressures on cricket as a whole is time. With so many people, with new competitions being added, with the time pressures on the world's best players, maybe that pressure will tell. And the first compromise will be to say, right, test matches can be 4 days, but try and get more into the day, which frees up a day here and a day there. Maybe just allows better use of the time through the 365 days of the year. I mean, the pressure is obviously on. And in recent weeks, of course, I've been reading stuff like you have, I'm sure, that instead of, 5 years ago, people were talking about controlling windows for T20 leagues, for IPL, for SAT20, for ILT20, for CPL, for all these, for Bangladesh, for Pakistan, for PSL. Let's have some windows whereby these leagues can all flourish and be allowed and given time so they get the best players into those leagues. Now we're talking about, do we need to establish a window for test cricket? So the pendulum has swung. And it seems that the influence of the multi-millions in whatever currency you want to talk that are washing around franchise cricket, it seems that test cricket is the thing that has to now beg for its place in the hierarchy. Now, that's obviously someone like me will resist that. But if it becomes blindingly obvious that that is the way to protect it, then maybe it's an avenue we have to go down. But that needs so many people to buy into the theory. And let's face it, there are the powerful nations, and it doesn't take any magic to work out who they are. And there are the other nations who have to fit in as best they can. So getting a compromise, again, I mean, I'm sort of skeptical of the powers of the so-called governing body, ICC, to actually achieve that, because we know how influence within ICC can change the way ICC thinks. But it is just about utilizing, I mean, it's a very simple statement and it's a very complicated thing to actually achieve, but it's utilizing that time for the best possible use. And I mean, I, for one, would be mortified if, whenever the shepherd's crook comes around my neck and someone says, right, your time on earth is done. And the same day someone was saying, oh, by the way, they've just finished the last ever test match. That actually might be some comment. It might be some relief. But I think it's worth fighting for. I think it's worth negotiating very hard for. And I think the best players in the world would still, as I said at the start of the interview, actually with Vivek, I think the best players in the world, I think, still rank themselves first and foremost on their success as a test match player.
Absolutely. Ravi, you want a rapid question again, or?
No, I think there's someone else on the standby. I would yield
No. There's no one on the standby, Ravi. There's no one on the standby. It's just that we have a couple of questions from the audience and members of Glorious Cricket. I'll just read them out. So, David, Mr. Amit Pandey says that you made batsmanship look like a flowing river in your time. And who in current times do you think you can relate that to?
Interesting. Well, thank you for the compliment, first of all. That flowing river was sometimes in full space and quite often in drought. So this is what happens to rivers. And this is what happens to batsmen as well. I mean, who are the best at the moment? The sort of the most fluent, I mean, the three best for me at the moment in world cricket, and you can put them in whatever order you want, depending where you come from. Virat Kohli, of course, is very much up there. Kane Williamson and Joe Root. There are others. I mean, you can sort of start putting caveats in, and you can go on for hours trying to add people in as 1A, 2B, 3C, and all the rest of it. But they are the people that I think have that sort of aura around them. When you watch them walk out to the crease. I mean, I'll use my English counterpart, Joe Root. He has that sort of uncanny, I mean, to use the river analogy, he has that flow to his batting. And whenever if I'm still allowed to commentate anywhere, quite often I use the word rhythm. And it's something which I think people who understand the game can identify with. Because you see someone like Joe, and he always seems to be in rhythm. There are days where that rhythm is minutely out and things can go wrong. But the great players have that rhythm, and that rhythm, which means that every movement is subtle, coordinated, has a little bit of time to spare, makes it look as though they have time to play the game and time to bat and time to watch the ball. And even the best, when they're out of rhythm, they lose that time. So rhythm is everything. And the ability just to pick the bat up, bring it down languidly, and see the ball timed away to a boundary is something that those three have. So, I would pay to watch any one of them.
Wonderful, wonderful answer, David. We're running out of time, and we hope to have this conversation again during the series. But Dr. Bali, one last.
David, does matches before the test match, maybe 3-day match or a 4-day match, make a difference? In 20 years ago, they used to be routine. Now we hardly see any preparatory matches. Does it make any difference to the outcome of test? Our players are good enough?
Well, it's a brilliant question, and the easy way out of it is, let's come back and have this conversation in a week's time and see what happens in Hyderabad in this first test match, because England obviously made a very deliberate plan to go to Abu Dhabi first, and they will have engineered their practice to try and replicate what they expect to face in India over the next 6.5, 7 weeks, whatever it might be. So they'll have studied what they need to do. They'll have practiced the things they think they need to do. I mean, one of the arguments against warm-up matches, it depends who you play against. If you play, on previous Indian tours, England has played against good sides, people who are maybe vying for the test team, the ones who are just outside the squad. So they get a good test, they get a good game of cricket before that first test match. When we used to tour in the 80s, barring some of the bizarre things that did happen, we were scheduled to play 3 or even 4 games before that first test match. Yeah. And obviously a bit of travelling in them. You basically had 3-4 weeks before you got to that first test match. The modern schedules don't allow that. There's too much going on. So players set their minds now, and they don't seem worried about it. They set their minds to say, right, day one of that first test match, it's like flicking the power on your circuit board at home. It's, right, up goes the button, up goes the switch. We're now on. But it does come with a risk. But let's face it, everything comes with a risk, and England's cricket comes with built-in risk, and it's exciting because of it. But that's the way they do it. And all being well, from their point of view, they will feel comfortable, ready. They'll have not long in India itself, just to get into the time zone, which I think is important. But it's only a slight difference between Abu Dhabi and Hyderabad, so that's not going to be a big issue. And it just depends entirely on the strength of mind.
David, we've come to the end, and this is a conversation brought to everyone by Playwright and Glorious Cricket. Glorious Cricket is a group of cricket experts like Mr. Gavri, who's a member. We have Mr. Gaikwad, who's been a member, and lots others, and journalists, writers, aficionados like us. And we really admire you, David, for your forthright views. We love having you back again and again. Hopefully, we'll have you back many a time during this series as well. But one final word before you say thank you, or we say thank you. What is your prediction for the series? Put you on the spot.
I know, I've given up doing this. It is the worst game in the world trying to predict. The number. Glenn McGrath nailed this. Glenn McGrath made life incredibly simple for himself by just saying 5-0 Australia every time someone asked him for a prediction. That doesn't apply here. My obvious instinct is that India have the greatest strength, all-round strength, and with the conditions that one might predict, would be favourites to win. Now, it's a question of margin then. I'd love, obviously I have to say straight away, I'd love England to win, and I'd love Ben Stokes, Brendan McCullum, the England squad to somehow be able to prove that their brand of cricket can be exported anywhere in the world. But it's going to be a mighty, mighty tough ask. I would expect that India would take the series, and it's really a question of margins, which I'll leave you experts. You're in that glorious country. You're closer to Hyderabad than I am, so I'll leave you to work out the margins.
But let me say, David, in thanking you, that you are one of the most glorious cricketers to have played the game. We are proud to have you on this conversation. And
I enjoy them. Thank you. very much for making contact again. If all goes well, we will indeed speak again over the next few weeks.
Thank you, Ravi and Dr. Bali as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gower. Yeah.
Thank you.